And that point of that suggestion from one of the campaigns was about when we leave, and we haven't left.
We're going to leave that there. We're going to leave that there because elements of this, not surprisingly, dovetail into everything that is happening in Germany, of course, because this is a country technically without a government. Chancellor Angela Merkel is the acting chancellor because talks about forming a coalition following September's splintered election result have not yet been fruitful as we go to air. It looks as if the SPD leader Martin Schulz has softened his position somewhat. Suggestions talks will resume, but really at this stage nothing is certain. Could there perhaps be another German election? And we all know what the knock-on might be. Stephanie, as far as we understand it at this stage, where do you think talks are? Crystal ball time. How do you think this is going to pan out?
Oh, that's really difficult to say because it's, as you say, a very fluid situation. On Monday, only Martin Schulz, the leader of the Social Democrats, said categorically they're not going into a grand coalition again with the CDU. Now it's Saturday, and he has said, well, we have to consider it because it's our responsibility.
Someone's twisted his arm somewhere, haven't they?
Yes, people within the party, but mainly the president, Steinmeier, who invited him to the Bellevue Palace on Thursday, and, well, they are from the same party, but he obviously said this is a moment of great responsibility for your party. So Martin Schulz, interestingly, yesterday was at the youth congress of his party, and he tried to sell the idea, and it didn't go well very much. So within the party, for the time being, it looks like a majority doesn't want it, which is important because they will have a vote on this. So even if the top of the party might agree to go into another coalition with Angela Merkel, the party might, or the party members might vote it down. So it's a tricky situation.
So you could have that curious situation where for several weeks, on paper, the coalition has been agreed, but your sense is it could yet be voted down by the members.
But at the end of the day, it looks like the SPD will always be the loser, because even if by this situation a new election is triggered, they will be hammered in the polls because they will be seen as the ones who didn't want to take responsibility. Yes. So, which is interesting again, because Angela Merkel, she could kind of take a step back again and is now watching everybody collapsing around her. So the CSU in Bavaria is in big trouble. The FDP is in trouble because they left the coalition talks, and the SPD is in terrible trouble. But be careful about this, because the voices in the CDU saying we need to have a change of leadership are growing with the day.
Hasn't Angela Merkel said that she would prefer fresh elections to a minority government?
Yeah, and it's not entirely clear that that will result in a stronger government in any shape. I mean, that's a real gamble for her.
Yes, quite.
Especially given that the last elections, both the CDU and the Social Democrats, their share of the vote went down. They are both declining parties, despite the fact that the German economy now is booming. That's the most remarkable disconnect there. But I think clearly, Merkel is a wounded figure, and it's all the more remarkable because just a couple months ago she seemed invincible. She was the European leader who took down Trump and, seemed to be the woman in the driving seat in Europe on Brexit. And now it looks like she will remain distracted by internal domestic politics for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and at the risk of bringing it all back to the UK, it's a German internal situation. I don't want to make it all about the UK, but we have the Brexit talks as a backdrop inevitably. Angela Merkel, as you suggest, portrayed as the calm hand on the tiller through all of this, the sort of heart of Europe, whether people like that or not. What, if this continues in this fashion, or if they have fresh elections, what does that do to Brexit talks? What does it mean?
Well, it doesn't bode well for Brexit, but it doesn't bode well for the rest of Europe either. So if Germany is paralyzed until February, maybe later, waiting for new elections, that's a disaster for everybody in Europe, because we don't have only the problem of the Brexit negotiations. We've got a lot of other things going on with the Trump administration behaving as it is behaving, with Russia hostility and belligerence, with instability growing around Europe. I mean, not to have a strong leadership as we're hoping to have after the election, it's going to be a big, big problem.
Do you think it's worrying, Alex?
I tend to disagree. I'm much more optimistic about the lack of government activity. I tend to think that when government isn't doing things, people tend to get on better. Consider the Belgians, where they went without a government for about 18 months. It was their best economic performance for decades. Far better off without government acting too much. But I was a bit surprised that Merkel put so much political capital and effort into the attempts to build a coalition that I thought wasn't really good. The so-called Jamaica coalition, black, yellow and green, because it seemed to me it wasn't going to work out between the old liberals, who are far more free market, although they're pro-EU, they're far more free market than most people having these conversations in Germany, and the Greens, who, like most green movements, are really like watermelons, green on the outside, red on the centre, very anti-free market. These two other parties were never really going to be on the same page. I think she's right. I think she's got to go back to the polls.
Like May, and then have a coalition with the DUP, sort of. The problem that we see in Germany is something that we're going to see also in other countries. We're going to see it in Italy with the next elections. It's the fragmentation of the voters. This is irreversible. This is the
not
kind
in the UK. More than 85% voted for two parties.
Yeah, but this is because of your system, if I may remind you.
Yeah, it was a consequence.
You're making the point in lots of countries it has proved to be the case.
Yeah, but also in Britain, regardless of the system, which is a bipolar system, so that locks in one government or one party or the other, still the Tories failed to find a majority. So they had to make a deal with the DUP. So I think that the biggest picture of what is going on is, are our democracies capable and ready to face what is happening in the voters' mind?
Yeah, and in Germany, that's a very important point, because why did people not want the Grand Coalition anymore? Because we didn't really have an opposition in Germany in a time when we had the refugee crisis and the Euro crisis, and there was an overall feeling that we need a strong opposition in Parliament. If this is not happening, we get more and more votes for the right-wing party, AfD, and that's why I think many people are wary, actually, to have another coalition again, and we have the same situation in the Bundestag now with 94 MPs of the AfD in the Bundestag.
Stephanie, thank you. We will certainly be discussing this in the weeks to come for